So last week we talked on the podcast about some pretty heavy stuff. And one of the things that I was thinking about as I was preparing for the episode, and it's so random, my aunt and her bucket of KFC used to have these annual family reunions with my dad's side of the family, and I had one aunt who was a real estate agent and didn't have a whole lot of support from her husband with taking care of her children. I mean, kind of, but not a lot. And she would show up in her work clothes to the family reunion with like a bucket of KFC or a cake from Kroger or something like that. And people would mock her and shame her and make fun of her for it because they all brought homemade stuff. And I just felt like it was such a metaphor for where we're at now. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. I'm Naomi, and this is Mosaic in Progress. One of the things that really stood out to me as I was evaluating the current political climate and the stuff that we're going through, and especially the executive order ending the collective bargaining, and that got me thinking about unions. And I grew up hearing that unions were just thugs. You know, it's just a whole bunch of thugs and mean people who were greedy. And then as I grew up and I became involved in politics and I heard the rhetoric around it, it was still just a whole bunch of thugs. Just a bunch of thugs who were taking the money for themselves and still, fucking over the workers. And then as I got into nursing and I started working with nurses who had done travel nursing and worked at union hospitals, and they started telling me about what the nurses' unions were like, I was like, this doesn't sound bad. This actually sounds really nice. And then I met my husband, who's a union man, and he started telling me about, what the union did, what his role was, and how it worked and everything. And I was like, this actually sounds like not a bad thing at all. This actually sounds pretty good to put the power in the hands of the workers. This sounds actually great. That they have the power because of their collaboration to get what they need. And that's one of the things that just like kind of blows my mind when you look at these big corporations like Tesla. Like, the workers at Tesla can't afford a Tesla. And the fact that you would work at creating something for someone else and not being able to afford the product that you're making, that you literally made with your own hands, that you can't afford to buy it, is immoral. That's wrong ethically. And if you can defend that, please take an hour and look in the mirror at yourself and just stare at yourself in the mirror, because you need to do some work on yourself, because you're supporting evil, unethical practices. I grew up thinking capitalism was the most ethical economic system. And I went through economics 101 and 102 while I was very conservative. I was very staunchly critical of the professor and what she taught me. And as I've gotten older and I've observed the world and society, the fact of the matter is that capitalism is a utopian idea. It is much a utopian idea as communism. Neither one of them work in actual society. They don't. Communism doesn't work in society because people are going to take advantage of it. People are going to be greedy. And you have to have someone in charge of the distribution, and they're going to be greedy because they want power. And they're going to fuck people over. Capitalism doesn't work because people are greedy. And people don't work for the betterment of society. They work for the betterment of themselves at the expense of others, and exploitation is an actual thing that happens. The only way to have an ethical and equitable society is some form of socialism, and that's not to say that that is a perfect model or that it works in every situation. It has to have some sort of democracy backing it. And that's not to say that that makes it perfect. But the only way to have a semi-equitable society is for government to intervene to prevent the greed from taking over. And the government has to be in check by the people. And I think that's one of the profound problems in our society today, is that our government gets away with whatever the fuck it wants to do because we don't keep it in check. We don't hold them accountable. We elect people and say, go with God, go forth and do good. And we don't check in with them. We don't hold them accountable. They do whatever the fuck they want to do. And I've been observing for several months now the political climate changing rapidly. And I thought, this is only bothering me because I'm not a Christian anymore, because I'm not conservative anymore. And that's not correct. I thought that for a long time. Like, if I was still a conservative evangelical, I'd be fine with this. I wouldn't be so stressed out all the time. And it's not correct. I don't need to be liberal or pagan to disagree with what's happening. What is happening is a complete usurpation of the rights of the people. What is happening is a complete disregard for the checks and balances set forth by the Constitution of these United States. What is happening is an unethical distribution of power across the executive branch to unelected officials who are appointed, who are acting as if elected and disregarding the checks and balances put in place. Elon Musk has absolutely no right to cut funding. No legal right to cut funding to anything. He can make a report and present it to the president and Congress. The congressional budget is passed as a law. It's voted on and passed and signed by the president. You can't just take an appointed official and undo it. That is illegal. That is beyond the confines of the government. It's beyond the. It's completely outside of how things work. Could he make a presentation? Could he present, what he found and have it voted on, or have the president present it to Congress and have, things adjusted? Absolutely, sure. But as an appointed official, he has absolutely no authority to just slash spending that has already been voted on, passed, approved, and signed by a president. And I don't know why people don't understand that. People say, oh, you just don't want him cutting the spending. I am all for cutting spending from the government. There's a lot of spending that is unnecessary and going on. I'm all for that, but he's not doing any of that. He is specifically targeting people. He's not targeting anything that is unnecessary or exorbitant or out of line. He's specifically targeting people. VA benefits, Social Security, Medicaid. It's specifically the average person who is utilizing benefits just to survive. And somehow he's also finding money in the budget to give to himself. He's doing that. He's acting as president without being elected. And it's a problem. It's a huge problem, and we should address it. And I see so many evangelicals just reveling in this. And I don't understand it because Elon Musk is not a Christian. Donald Trump is not a Christian. Neither one of them espouse Christian ideology in any way whatsoever. And for that matter, there is no command in the Bible to take over government. Nowhere in the New Testament does it tell Christians, take over the government, make sure you're in charge if you can be. And there's no command to convert. You're commanded to preach the gospel, not to convert them. You're not responsible for people's conversion. And the thing that's really ironic to me is that in my time in the church, which was most of my life, the biggest things that they fought against were fornication and homosexuality. Homosexuality is not a sin according to the Bible unless you mistranslate things. The verses that were mistranslated to condemn homosexuality were actually condemning pedophilia. And if you look at the tale of Sodom and Gomorrah that everybody upholds as like the pinnacle of the condemnation of homosexuality, actually the condemnation was that they weren't hospitable to strangers. And that's said in the New Testament. The sin of Sodom was that they were inhospitable to strangers, which is what we're doing right now with our illegal immigrant policies. In fornication, it's another mistranslated verse. Fornication is rape. We have mistranslated it to misconstrue it, to be a condemnation of sex outside of marriage. It's not. It's condemnation of rape. But we don't like condemning rapists. Well, we don't like condemning racists either. We don't like condemning rapists. Because too many of those are in the pulpit. And then we wouldn't have anyone to preach the sermons. And for that matter, we have made this mountain of an issue of transgender issues. It's not in the Bible anywhere. You can search high and low throughout the 66 books. There's nowhere in there that addresses the issue of being transgender in one way or another. It's not in there. It's not in there at all. You have to make it up. The reason that trans issues have become such a political thing is because Elon Musk hates his trans daughter. He, as the eugenicist that he is, paid for her to be a male. Oh, did you not know that Elon Musk uses IVF for all of his children? Now you do. He pays for them to be male because he's a misogynistic eugenicist. And so when his daughter decided she did not want to be the gender that he paid for her to be, he's acting like a Karen wanting to speak to the manager. I mean, he said she's dead. She was killed by the woke mind virus. I mean, he's known racist. And the evangelical church is eating it up because they hate trans people. They have absolutely no biblical reason to have the animosity that they do toward them. But they feel like it's probably not right, and all that they've got is, in the beginning God made them male and female. And that's literally their argument. And God doesn't make mistakes. And that's all that they can say about it. And it's so funny because in the more wealthy evangelical churches, you will see women with Botox and boob jobs and lip injections and men with hair plugs. And all of these are gender affirming care. And even in the less wealthy churches, you'll see women dyeing their hair so that they hide their grays, and those that can afford it getting the Botox and the lip injections and maybe boob jobs. And all of that is seen as okay. And they might say, oh, they're a little vain. But that's it. They don't look at them as an abomination. And it's the same thing. The fact of the matter is that we have digressed in our society to an uneducated populace that has defaulted to fear. Fear of anything different. Fear of anything that challenges what we view as normal. And I see people so often calling the right wing sheep, and they're not. I grew up on a farm. I'm a farm girl. They're not sheep. I've seen sheep. Sheep are pretty docile. They just do whatever you want them to do. They just kind of follow you around. They might get a little stubborn sometimes and decide they want to do their own thing, but when it comes down to it, they know you're the one that takes care of them. They'll follow you everywhere. They'll do whatever you want them to do. Just quietly and meekly and lovingly. And they don't care if somebody else is not doing it because they're too busy following you. What we have are a society of chickens. Chickens follow whoever's got the food. But they destroy anyone that's different. If you have a chicken who has a wound, it will die if you don't remove it from the flock. Because the rest of the chickens will peck it to death. They cannot stand to see anything different, and they will peck it until it is dead. You have a chicken that's got a problem with its eye, that chicken's going to die very soon because they'll peck its eye until its brain is leaking out of its eye socket. Chickens are vicious toward anything that is not normal. We don't have a society of sheep. We have a society of chickens. And it's fueled by our social media use. And I have such a moral problem with social media use now. Because I've been using social media for probably 15 years now. I was using Facebook before it was cool. When everybody's like, hey, you use what now? It's, oh, that seems weird. No, I don't have Facebook. Like, it's been a long time. I'm old. Anyway, I have most of my pictures for the last decade and a half on Facebook. I've lost several phones, And if you've ever lost a phone and lost all your data and your pictures from it, you know what I'm talking about. But I was like, at least my pictures are on Facebook, though. I still have them. Most of my pictures from the last 15 years are on Facebook. And most of my connections with people are on Facebook. I'm very involved in the pipe community, and by very involved in the pipe community, I mean I have a lot of connections with them on Facebook. If Facebook went away, the connection would be gone. And social media has become our way of connecting. And when we don't have it, there's no more connection. And so there's a billionaire who is profiting off of our need for connection. I mentioned at the beginning of the episode my aunt and her bucket of KFC. She was working really hard to support her family. And what she had time for was to run through a drive-thru. And she showed up late with food from a drive-thru because it was important for her to be there and for her to let her daughter be there around her family. And what happened was that everyone talked shit about her behind her back for bringing fast food. This is the society that we're living in right now. Is people who want you to fit into a mold. And when you try to fit into that mold with the resources that you have and the ability that you have, and it's just not what they wanted, they will peck you to death like a chicken. I want everyone listening right now to examine for themselves what kind of a chicken you are. Because at this point, we're all chickens. When I was in my early 20s, we had game chickens that we let run out in the yard. And we had this one hen who hatched like a dozen eggs. She had a huge brood and she paraded them all over the yard. And there was one little chick that she had that just couldn't get up in the morning. It would always get left behind. And we'd see her parading around the yard, and we'd hear from off in the distance this little chick, peep, peep, peep. It was going, where did everybody go? I'm alone. We'd have to scurry it off to be with its mama and siblings. And we went to a livestock show with our cows and pigs. I was very active in 4-H, if I haven't mentioned that on the podcast previously. And we came home from the show, and our front yard was covered in feathers. I mean, covered in feathers. That mama hen and all of her chicks had been killed by some wild animal. And as we were surveying the damage and feeling very sad about it, I heard in the barn, peep, peep, peep. And there was that little chick. Because it had not been involved with the others, it did not get killed. And that little chick became my baby, and it slept with me. It would wake me up by getting in my hair and scratching my head. And I raised it up to pullet size. which is like prepubescent size if you don't know anything about chickens. That chick survived because it didn't follow the crowd. It's really time to evaluate very seriously what type of chicken you are. Because we're all chickens at this point. And you need to figure out which one you are and how this is going to end for you. 250 years is about the max life of empires. Next year is going to be 250 years for America. And we are just beelining it for the dumpster fire of humanity. It's time to decide what side of history you're on. It's time to stop listening to political pundits and look at reality. Because the walls are closing in and the clock is running out. And at this point, you have to decide if you're going to be in the guillotine, running the guillotine, or on the outskirts hoping you don't get put in the guillotine. Those are your options. Because that's where we have driven ourselves to as a society. There's no peaceful options left. We haven't allowed any of those to survive. So pick your place. And stop pretending that you're anything but where you have picked. So I see so many people claiming to be liberty lovers while supporting everyone who should be getting walked to the guillotine. I'm not going to pretend that this was an inspiring episode. I know it wasn't. I keep thinking about this expression, to whom much power is given, much is expected, and I was ruminating over that over and over again. I was like, where did that come from? It's actually from the Bible. Luke chapter 12 and verse 48. But he who did not know, yet committeth things deserving of stripes, shall be beaten with few. For everyone to whom much is given, for him much will be required. And to whom much has been committed, of him they will ask the more. We were given a free society. Free, quotation marks. There's a lot of arguments that can be made about that for women and people of color and the natives and etc. But we were given an allegedly free society. And what we did with it was oppress people. And we have continued to oppress people, and we are continuing to oppress people even more. So figure out what side of history you're going to be on. Because the history books are being written right now. And I don't think most of the people who consider themselves to be such lovers of liberty are going to find themselves on the right side of history. Time is running out for you to make the right decision. So figure out where you fall and stand. Thank you for joining me again this week on the podcast. Hope you will join me next week as we both continue to work on our mosaic in progress.